Hello, everyone. This is a CHE210 nutrition check-in session with an upcoming exam and just to go through some expectations. And let's show a screen here. Okay, so it's been a few weeks. Hopefully everybody's getting on track, getting used to some regular pattern of doing the tasks and learning and wondering and interacting in this course, in this distance learning course. Again, we have these virtual lives periodically, about every couple of weeks, and especially one before our exam. So we have 5 exams worth 65%. That's about 13% of a grade each one. The format of these exams is 40 questions, and you have 100 minutes, 100 timed minutes using the lockdown browser. So it was important to go through that practice run, doing that practice quiz. And as I said, it was really just to go through the routine, have that browser on your computer, on your device, and be able to use it, follow directions. Very important, and to the integrity of the test taking process for our college, for yourself, and and the expectations of taking exams in this course. The 25% of the effort of the grade is the MindTap weekly assignments. Those you should be keeping up with. There still are a few people, believe it or not, that have not found and not logged into MindTap. I've tried to get in touch with those folks. If you are having a difficulty with that, please contact me as soon as possible. You should be well into the MindTap. Yes, it's we're in week 3, and that's the chapter 3 digestion. The other part of the effort and grade in the course are the discussion board assignments that pop up not every single week, but most weeks. This is where you're prompted with some hopefully curious, intriguing question that you put a thoughtful comment together, and that's not a simple sentence or word or phrase. It's a thoughtful comment to get the full credit, in addition to reading some posts of your peers and commenting thoughtfully again on at least 2 of those posts by your fellow students. In our Blackboard, the format, as you hopefully have recognized, is modules. You have these modules for each week. Within those modules, you have the tasks and materials needed. You have access to a PowerPoint, access to a lecture on that chapter or chapters, PowerPoint, study guides, a couple different study guides, and the layout of the MindTap expectations, which are shown there. They're always in this format. And some of them you have multiple tries. Some of them, a couple of them are timed in this review folder. So you do your best. It pushes you to think about what you know and what you may not know. You should get back on them, and because those are the important points that we're trying to learn through our reading and studying. There are additional study resources in this section called additional resources, so look for that. That's where I'll point out one or two of the additional resources in a moment. Okay. Each of the tasks in MindTap per week are modest points. They add up. There's about 1,000 points to get for this 25% of your grade. Should be able to get most of those points just by keeping up with weekly tasks. So set aside a certain amount of time, some time that you have dedicated to the course during the week, and knock those out. Here's a view of Blackboard and our initial materials syllabus. You should have that syllabus, have that schedule especially available so you know where we are in the course. Of course, heads up for announcements. Check them out as soon as possible and look for any kind of videos that should be helpful to you. Here you see Module 1 that you have gotten through, overview of nutrition. Again, just some reminders to keep on track. And talk about MindTap. These are, you don't see these until they're all open up. They're timed to open up at the week that they're the relevant study material. Uh, uh, these are the, as mentioned before in our orientation little WebEx, these tools, you may want to use one or two or more. Here's the book. Here's the Diet and Wellness Plus activity app. There's a if you want to hear parts of the book read to you, there's that. There's highlighting. There's a bunch of different resources here. Even test cards there, little cards made up for you to learn the vocabulary well. So pretty intuitive once you know what you're looking for. Here's week 1 diet and wellness plus just a point for clarification. The where we're recording and inputting our food and drink and activity, we do that for at least 3 days, 3 straight days. A little more is better, maybe a week. Then you have a good amount of data to each week. You have a task of going back to those data and using the app to make a relevant report for that week. It might be your distribution of calories among the macronutrients. It might be which of the vitamins are you lacking? Which do you get plenty of? Maybe which nutrient you get more than the expected or recommended value. So each week you're doing some other type of report and responding to it. Lockdown browser. If most people have had this before and did not have any trouble, or just follow directions and it worked out fine. There are sometimes a compatibility thing that you have to clear up, but there's plenty of resources to do that, including myself. I help out sometimes in the few years of using this, I've seen some of the issues to clear up. For instance, you might have your computer might have an access issue that you have to give access to this browser to have the camera available, that kind of thing. There's what the lockdown browser looks like when you open it up. This, we're looking at the first opening when you've opened it up, and you go through these steps, these little tasks before you get to your exam. So you have the check-in, the additional instructions, you have your student photo, you have to show an ID, environmental check, you show that you don't have various things you shouldn't have available to you during a test. Okay, smile for your photo. Uh, and some people are not having, but hopefully you know now you have to have a photo ID available, either a college or other photo ID that you have, a driver's license or something else that I'm sure that it's you taking the exam. Okay, in your the first part, we're learning some vocabulary that's used. This was, we come to this actually in nutrition overview, and it's referred to also in chapter 2 when we're talking about good eating patterns, variety, moderation, calorie control, balance, and adequacy. So each of these you can think of how they apply to a good, nutritious eating plan. We'll do this a little later. And be curious about your foods that you normally consume, foods that you cook, foods that you purchase. For instance, here, this is a familiar site for a lot of us, either regularly or infrequently, or maybe never, but you might see it when you're walking through an airport or somewhere that has these kinds of restaurants. And more food purveyors are expected to be more transparent about what's the nutritional makeup of the food that you're considering to purchase and consume. Here has kcals, at least. You can ask. Sometimes they have available more in-depth, detailed nutritional information. I've asked a number of times at, for instance, a McDonald's, can I talk to the manager? I'd like to see the nutritional facts about the menu. Can I get that? Sometimes the manager knows where to find that and lets you take a picture of it. Sometimes not. They're not aware of it. They really should be. In each chapter, we have this very detailed objectives and outline. It's a good thing to look through at some point after you've read the chapter, read through and done the mind tap um, assignments. Because from these kinds of objectives comes some of the 6 or so open-ended question or short answer or mini essay type questions that you'll get on the exam. To make up the exam, I mentioned 40 questions. Majority of them are multiple choice, maybe some true false. And the others, weighted a little more heavily, are open-ended questions, short answer, maybe 5 or 6 of those. For instance, it might be this one right here. Name the 6 major classes of nutrients, and which are organic and which yield energy. That's a pretty good question. You can think about that. Others might relate to, in this particular chapter, might be one of these acronyms that you've read about. You've probably heard some of them, maybe not all of them. For instance, the EAR, maybe you've never heard of that one, estimated average requirements versus the RDA. So each of these are recommendations. Average means in the curve of um, people's needs for a given nutrient. There's always bell curve distributions. The one in the middle is that average, the one that's 98%, covering 98% of the population, would be the RDA. So the RDA sometimes is much more than is needed for someone needing this part is at this part of the bell curve. But we want to give recommendations to cover everyone. And majority of cases, um, nutrients do not have this upper level that is beyond a tolerance level that may become toxic or have negative effects. There's just a small number of nutrients that have an upper level. Here's another study resource that is in the additional resources little module in Blackboard, and it's a nice thing to go through. Unfortunately, they didn't keep this in later versions of the textbook, so I provide it here. It's 4 or 5 pages of really nicely outlined, condensed versions of the topics and content that you've learned in the chapter, along with some multiple choice questions and even some open-ended type questions that sometimes I use because they're as you might expect, the essence of a lot of the content that's we're trying to learn in the chapter. Again, so chapter 1 is the overview, and right in the chapter, and here we show you some of the main things we're learning, that we're trying to learn. So some of these are also what I might ask on the test, and it should be in your studying. So that question about the six types of nutrients. So here's a few of them, and which ones are organic and which ones are not, meaning inorganic. So organic means anything with carbon, These two are not organic. They don't have carbon. They're minerals or metals usually, and some non-metals. But if they have carbon, like all the vitamins, they are considered organic. This was an important kind of section, that tying diet and wellness together, diet and health together, that in the top 10 causes of death, 4 of them are pretty closely tied or correlated with our eating patterns. So heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes. And in chapter 2, again, pay attention to the learning objectives in the front of the chapter. 6 principles of diet planning. We saw those blocks there, including variety and adequacy and calorie control, those kind of things. And here are those principles: nutrient density. Always a couple of questions around that. You'll see a couple in these practice questions coming up: moderation, variety. Here are the 6 again. So really the big part of chapter 2, talking about these kinds of principles. Also in chapter 2, discussion around how do we evaluate our eating pattern. One way is to know what's the nutritional makeup of the food or the meal. And in packaged foods, we have some good information right on labels. I know how to read the label. one of the things I asked in the pre-course um, questionnaire. Do you look at labels? And a good amount of students said yes, I do. That's good. And what do you look for? Maybe you look for serving size. Maybe you look for calories per serving. Well, maybe you're looking for how much iron or protein is in there. Well, there are, um, by law, food manufacturers for packaged or processed foods are required to put a certain number of these nutrients on the label. For instance, sodium, because that's a nutrient of concern. The concern being the good possibility of getting too much sodium, not good for our health and blood pressure. Cholesterol sometimes is a concern for some people. Uh, Carbs, certainly added sugar, that's a big one, needs to be on a label. And not only on a label, also required to have little bubbles of a few different really important information right on the front of packaged foods. And you probably noted that already when looking at a package. Uh, just overview, Michael Pollan, very prolific writer, knowledgeable journalist and scientist and nutritionist. He's not a dietitian, but a brilliant writer, good speaker. His kind of real concise way of boiling down his take on things: eat food, meaning real food, as little as possible processed. Fresh food, he means, not too much. So calories and dense food within your activity, correlated with your activity and bodily needs, and mostly plants. Chapter 3. So this more things to learn in chapter 3, but it's important stuff to get a nice foundation as we go into the next bunch of chapters, because then we look closer at each of the important nutrients coming up: the carbohydrate and lipids, that is fats, and proteins. We go further and look more closely at details around them. But in this chapter is an overview of this sort of thing for all nutrients: digestion, absorption, and transport. Get some foundations and generalities. For instance, these objectives describe how do we absorb different nutrients, where they go into the bloodstream directly or into the lymph, and that's a difference between their hydrophobicity or lipophysicity, that is water soluble, fat solubleness of the breakdown of digestion of raw foods. What about the hormones? Digestion hormones, really important. We'll review that coming up here. We we do a little bit of anatomy, physiology. Certainly, the digestive tract is this not a simple, but more of a complicated pathway through the body. Number of things have to happen for nutrients to get actually into the body, that is, into the places where they need it, in organs and in the bloodstream, and so on. So, we hear a lot about this, and it's very interesting. If you haven't taken yet your anatomy physiology course yet, then gotta learn these terms. Okay, and as I mentioned before, about 40 nutrients we'll get to know. Essential nutrients, that means that we don't make them, or we don't make them in sufficient quantity to satisfy our needs of staying healthy, to staying away from diseases and building strength and doing our normal activities. So digestion, which does it occur after absorption, relies on gravity, occurs in the stomach and small intestine only, and it's that last one breaks down food into nutrients. So food we don't absorb directly. We have to break it down into absorbable sizes. Usually they're unit sizes like amino acids or at least small polypeptides or small peptides or monosaccharides, break them down into monosaccharides to absorb or smaller pieces of carbohydrate, fats. Of course, we have to dismantle into fatty acids to absorb fats. We work the hardest to absorb them because of their inability to move or to dissolve very well in aqueous systems like our blood and most of our organs. Challenges is a good question too. Challenges to digestion. You could think of some. Just think about going down that diagram we just saw of anatomy of the GI tract, because digestion relies on all these things. You could think of things that might be of challenges to these, all the way to taking pharmaceuticals, taking prescription drugs has an effect on our microbiome, to help digest and absorb certain parts of fiber, and to help move our food through the system in a continuous stream, break down and not absorb things we don't want to absorb. Okay, so we could put these in order. We just saw the diagram there. And of course, it's mouth, esophagus. You have an epiglottis there to make sure it goes down the esophagus and not down the breathing tube to our lungs. Stomach, small intestine, large intestine, rectum, and anus. These are important. The the main GI hormones, as this is an important table in your text. Really know these three hormones. Hormones, of course, mean these are complex organic molecules, relatively large, that are mainly protein in nature, and they're formed and released somewhere, like the pancreas or in microvilli, to go somewhere else and to make something happen. Gastrin, gastrin production and response to food in the stomach, and the physical presence. Usually we're talking about protein, and secreted from where? From the stomach wall, stimulates stomach glands to secrete hydrochloric acid, HCl. HCl is crucial for digestion of protein because it's the proper pH, the acidity, pretty low acidity, between 1 and 2 pH. That's good for the protease enzymes to digest the protein. Also, the HCl, the acidic environment, just helps to physically kind of unroll the protein, make it available to the enzymes that need to break down those protein into smaller pieces, amino acids and peptides. Secretin, also very important. This is a response to acidic chyme. So chyme may be a new word for you. That's the digested or partially digested material coming out of the stomach. It's acidic, but it needs to be made to neutral, so it needs to be neutralized. And that happens by stimulating the pancreas to secrete these bicarbonate-rich, that is neutralizing juices with a whole lot of different enzymes to continue the digestion process at the proper pH that's slightly alkaline. So that means above pH 7. Cholecystokinin, all about us handling fat and some protein, and that's relies on coming out of the gallbladder and pancreas. And this is because we need to emulsify fat in the duodenum to continue the digestive. Duodenum is that high section of the small intestine right after the stomach, where a lot of further digestion takes place. So you have these feedback loops mentioned. So the gastrin might be produced in the stomach, and we have HCl. We don't want to waste making HCl. We use chloride ion that is an essential nutrient, but there's no sense in keep dumping out HCl into the stomach when everything has been digested and there's no more protein in the stomach. So there's a negative feedback telling the production of digestion to stop. Same thing with CCK and the fat digesting enzymes, lipases. When the fat is digested and absorbed and not present, we get this wonderful signal saying stop making that CCK. Now I have here just sample questions that you could see the a little bit of type of questions. You might see some of these questions too, or forms of them, which is most characteristic of a chronic disease. So that's it doesn't happen real quickly. Sometimes you don't have noticeable symptoms. It progresses slowly, like a nutrient deficiency. It progresses slowly, or diseases of the bone, very slow to progress, osteoporosis, and very hard to or impossible to reverse. Child develops a strong dislike of noodle soup after she consumes a bowl while sick with the flu. A reaction is an example of a food-related. Okay, we look at some of these. Some of them might sound like there's more than one that's correct. Well, you have to pick the right one, of course, you want. But what sounds the best? So you take your time with questions. 100 minutes on a test and 40 questions. You do need a little more time for the free response questions. So figure out your strategy to negative association. How to take the test. A person who eats a bowl of oatmeal every day, that's going to be habit. What type of nutrient is needed by the body and must be supplied by foods? Okay, that is the definition of essential nutrient. Nutrient, which one is a macronutrient? So there's There's this term is applied to just the nutrients that we take in largest amount. And in this case, we don't consider water as a macronutrient. That when we take in even a larger amount, if we're talking about by mass, than the macronutrient. We're talking about proteins, fat, and carbohydrate. Those are the macronutrients. These others we take in much less quantity. Minerals, micrograms perhaps, proteins, carbohydrates, and fats we take in grams quantities, tens of grams. Like it might be 70 grams of protein or 300 grams of carbohydrate. Water-soluble vitamins, fat-soluble vitamins, again, but much, much smaller, milligrams or microgram quantities. That's orders of magnitude less than the macronutrients. Which nutrient listed here is an organic compound? Hopefully you'd be able to distinguish that. Vitamin C, we said all vitamins are organic, that is carbon-based. The others are inorganic. Salt is sodium chloride on your periodic table, hydrogen and oxygen, calcium, metal, and iron, transition metal. Essential nutrient is another type of way to talk about the same question as a bit earlier. An essential nutrient is one that large quantities? No, synthesized. Can only be synthesized by the body, cannot be made in sufficient quantity. So it's that. So we can synthesize some of the essential nutrients, but not enough. We can, our microflora mostly can make some of the vitamins for us. A little bit of B12, some biotin, some vitamin K, but not enough to satisfy the day-to-day needs. So as you saw, there's a little bit of math in chapter 2 when we're looking at the macronutrients, and we have to know these conversion factors of kcals per gram of protein, carbohydrate, and fat. So there's just two numbers to remember, but you got to remember how they apply. For carbohydrate and protein is 4 kcals per gram, 4 kcals per gram for carbohydrate and protein. And for fat, it's 9 kcals per gram. And that's, that's the number. It's not super accurate, but it's to one significant figure, but that is a good estimate. That's what's done in calculations. That's how things appear on a nutrition label. And for this question, so 1400 kcals, and it has 30 grams of fat. So we need to convert this 30 grams of fat using whatever you call it, dimensional analysis or unit analysis. There are 9 kcals per gram. So we multiply that out, we get 270 kcals. And then what's that percent of the total intake? Now on the browser, a Lockdown browser has a calculator at the top, so you will not be able to, and I don't want to see you picking up a phone or even a calculator. You have a calculator right at the top of the screen. And so you'd punch that in. You'd put in 270, well, maybe you could do it in your head, divided by 1400. It comes out to 19.3. Or more accurately, I might say it's one significant figure, but we're just not worried about significant here. And use the best answer here, and they're all three significant figures. There's two significant figures. Sorry. So 19.3. So that falls in a recommended amount of fat, getting calories from fat. You might remember those questions coming up here. Which statement best describes the composition of most foods? Okay. So it's good to, in taking multiple choice questions, you might use this strategy. It's good to do this. And think about the question for a moment before looking at the possible answers. So what is your thoughts about the composition of food? And it's talking about the macronutrients, maybe, mostly. Okay, so most contain one of the three energy nutrients, equal amounts of the three, a mixture of the three, although only one or two predominate, contain only two of the three, and the two contained in equal amounts. They contain two of the three nutrients, and one is present in far greater than other. There's a few of these that you can rule out, like why would there be equal amounts of anything? Equal amounts, really, in all foods? No. So you can cross out a bunch of these, equal amounts, only one or the other. So it turns out that if you think about most foods, they probably contain some amounts of all three of these, but maybe very, very small one or two of them. So this is the most reasonable answer. How many vitamins? So as mentioned in passing, and we'll talk much more detail about vitamins later, but you should have some idea. There are 9 water solubles and 4 fat soluble, and we'll talk about those in detail. The fat solubles, maybe you remember already, A, D, E, K. And then of the water solubles, there are a bunch of B vitamins and then vitamin C there. In the first chapter, a bit about generally how we should trust science. Why is science, good science, published science, peer-reviewed science is something we should respect and use, and try not to extend it beyond what we know, because science is always a building our understanding of things. We hardly ever understand things completely. It's to the best of our science. And even then, we theorize, extend data, but support it in a sufficient way. Tentative solution to a problem, you might say prediction, but the more specific term is hypothesis. This question, you've been asked to help a top nutrition researcher conduct a human experiment on vitamin C. As the subjects walk into the laboratory, distribute all the vitamin C pill bottles to the girls and all of the placebo pills bottles to the boys. The researcher instantly informs you that you've made two errors in your research practice. What steps should you have taken to conduct the experiment correctly? So you think about that for a minute, you're probably thinking of at least a couple of things. Um, the best kinds of science, which in nutrition sometimes are difficult to conduct because of compliance and um, differences among people, among other things. But certainly you should try to be as close as possible, have blinded, controlled, randomized studies. You've heard of that term, a randomized blinded study as being clinical study to be the best type, but very difficult in certain times, very expensive. So the mistakes made here. Why would we give all the C to the girls and none to the boys? And the researcher, the helper, the nutrition researcher, that is giving out, selecting who knows what is given out, and the subjects, so the participants in the study, know what they're getting. Okay, that's a different kind of study. That's looking at placebo effect, maybe. But he was researching probably the efficacy of certain vitamin C compositions or amounts, this kind of thing. So, what's the mistake? Giving all the boys and girls, boys vitamin C and girls placebo? Okay, that happens to be backwards. Distributing the bottles randomly. Uh, so, and telling them what they're getting, okay, that's partially right, but this, why should we tell them? Telling the subjects in which group they're in, but preventing yourself. So this case, you're blinding yourself, but telling the subjects, that doesn't sound too well. Preventing yourself from knowing what's in the pills and distributing them randomly. That sounds better. And that's the correct answer. Okay, so also in on the subject of good science and what science should we believe, how is science done properly, how do you describe findings, that's what this one is about. An increase in exercise accompanied by a decrease in body weight is an example of what? So we have increase of exercise, that's up, and decrease in body weight, that's opposite. So that's a negative type inverse correlation. The purpose of both the RDA and adequate intake. So adequate intake, you may remember, is if we don't more precisely know the amount of a nutrient that's needed, but we know how much is enough. So we'd like to be more accurate, but sometimes it's not really determined, or it varies so much that we just say this is an adequate amount. And in general, it's setting nutrient goals for individuals. That's in general, and it's not the other choices. Which is true of nutrient intake. Higher is always better. No, that's maybe it's a bad misconception. Intake's near the average. The average requirement decrease the risk of deficiency. Well, that's not the case, because the average is just that. There's the bell curve, and the average is in the middle here. What about if you give that much, then what about the people that on this side of the curve that need more? So that's not That's not good. A typical intake falling between the RDA and the EAR is always adequate. Well, no, that doesn't hit everybody. It's the only thing that's a correct statement among these is the intakes above the upper limit put an individual at the risk of toxicity. That's the reason why we have upper limits. If there are some, not all nutrients have upper limits. And this one, percent of kcals intake for protein, fat, carbohydrate that thought to be good, to be reduce risk of chronic diseases, to that sort of thing. Okay, so that's the macronutrients, and we're talking about what's a good amount. So you look for that, and it's this AMDR, strange acronym, is the acceptable macronutrient distribution ranges. And speaking about that, what's the one for fat? Well, these are very high. This happens to be the carbohydrate range, the recommended carbohydrate range. This one is the protein range. It's a good idea to remember these. And this one is the fat, 20 to 35%. Now we try to keep our eating pattern within these ranges, and part of the diet and wellness and activity app that you complete will give you an idea where you fall on an average, at least. So that's where I'm going to put in as accurate as data as possible, because this is a nice thing to know. On average, are you falling in recommended ranges for the macronutrients? Sequences, stages of most typical development of a nutrient deficiency results from inadequate intake. So the stages. So we know that it's similar to a chronic disease, that it's slow onset. So you look at these wordings here. Probably inadequate nutrient intake is the start, then abnormal within the body, and then overt signs. You don't see abnormal so quickly. This is not going to decline really until inadequate intake, overt signs. So it's that first one. Okay, so that's pretty important. Who's the most appropriate person among these to talk about nutrition information? Well, you probably go back and forth between a registered dietitian and a medical doctor. So the registered dietitian is the one that may be on top of most information. There are doctors that really also keep up, especially a doctor like an endocrinologist. They're also much more knowledgeable than most any other health professional about nutrition information. But also the registered dietitian is regularly trained and keeps up with literature, has frequent learning the newest and keeping a license up to date, the registered dietitian. Nutritionist is not necessarily one that a person that's licensed and the most knowledgeable. So, and not all, most states do not have registration for nutritionists, they're dietitians. And because nutritionist sounds like the one, the Academy of Dietetics and Nutrition has added that to what the professional is called. Professional is called registered nutritional dietitian, nutritional dietitian. Okay, hope I got that right. Diet planning principle that provides all nutrients, fiber, and energy in amounts sufficient to maintain. Okay, the word sufficient is key there, and that's adequacy. Nutrient dense. Okay, this is a really important topic and concept. Nutrient dense refers to getting more nutrients per calories. Because calories, most things carry calories. If I really want to get the other things like the vitamins and minerals and fiber along with the calories, and that's making the food dense in nutrients, not just carbohydrate, fat, and protein. Okay, we're gonna through the course you'll expand your knowledge and thinking about what's in these food groups. Fruit group, we have these vitamins. Vitamin A, carotenoids, lots of times add color, yellow or orange to fruits. Vitamin C, antioxidant, ascorbic acid. Food exchange systems originally developed for people with diabetes. The addition of calcium to some orange juice products by a food manufacturer is known as. So when the addition of a nutrient is not normally present in that food, then it is fortifying. We're fortifying the food with something new. If the nutrient, if we want to bolster, put more, if we wanted to say add extra vitamin C to orange juice, that's enriching. So in this case, it's because calcium doesn't naturally occur to any significant extent in orange juice. So if we added that, that's fortifying. If we added vitamin C to orange juice, it would be enriching. Nutrient labels. Two minerals that must be on a label and presented as the daily value. Okay, well, these are trace minerals. They're not the ones. These also trace, so it's these minerals. In fact, of the minerals we see here, these are probably the more likely ones for people to be deficient of. Food labels express the nutrient content in relation to a standard values known as the daily values. So it's presented as percent daily values, and these values are based on a 2000 kcal intake, a daily intake, which is kind of an average. The process by which food is broken down into absorbable components is digestion, and you should think about excretion. This is chewing. This is excretion of waste. Chyme. Okay, we mentioned this a little earlier. Chyme comes out of the stomach. It's very acidic. It needs to be neutralized with bicarbonate from the pancreas. This is it is semi-mass of a semi-solid mass of undigested, but it's coming out of the stomach before the small intestine. Function of the mucus in the stomach, that's protects the stomach from gastric juices, which are acidic and having proteases, so it's not damaged by acid or enzymes. HCl in the stomach, okay, that makes it acidic. It's optimal for the proteases and also does some digesting of the protein, also just being acidic. Okay, bile, we should be thinking about cholecystokinin. We should be thinking about micelles. We should be thinking of emulsification. Okay, so this is a bit more, probably the more complicated of digestions, that is of fat compared to carbohydrate and protein. Class of nutrients requiring the least amount of digestion, but you can argue it's the simple carbohydrates, things like sucrose and lactase. We have those enzymes present. It's very quick to break those into monosaccharides and absorb easily. Functions of the intestinal villi crypts. Okay, those are a lot of surface area, a lot of places for enzymes to be secreted to have a lot of digestion taking place and absorption in the small intestine. The upper is the duodenum. Function of the intestinal microvilli. Okay, that's the absorption, the transport of the nutrient molecules across the GI wall and being absorbed perhaps directly into the bloodstream or into the lymph system, depending on if it's water soluble or fat soluble. To assist digestion and absorption, it's usually best to what? So these are theories and some misconceptions about eating a certain kind of food only, or eating once a day, or in general combining foods enhance absorption. Some nutrients help other nutrients to be absorbed. Vitamin B12, real important for absorbing digested protein. Vitamin C, important, enhances absorption of iron. So there's these synergies. Most metabolically active organ, it's argued that the liver is that one. What's the primary role of normal thriving intestinal bacteria population, sometimes called the microbiome or your biome? Only in the last 25 years or so has this been recognized as being pretty important for normal health and maintenance of immune system. Which substance is known to be produced by the small intestine bacteria? Okay, so you go through these, and I mentioned already there are some certain vitamins that are made by normal metabolism of what the bacteria get in the small intestine, and those are vitamins. the two systems that coordinate all digestion processes. So you should be familiar with these terms and how they apply to nutrition, nervous and endocrine. Substance that functions to control the release of HCl. Okay, so here are your digestive enzymes, not enzymes, digestive hormones that are produced somewhere in some other organ that go somewhere else to make some action happen. Insulin, so that's all about um, sugar, glucose absorption into tissue, okay, released by the pancreas. Gastrin, that's your stomach, right, the acidity, so that's the one. And secretin, cholecystokinin, glucagon. Glucagon is the one that's opposite action of insulin. Glucagon, when it's also put out by the pancreas into the bloodstream, it um, tells tissue and the liver to put more glucose into the bloodstream. Okay, again, the digestive enzymes, you should know these well. This is only the handful of them. Stimulates pancreas to release the bicarbonate-rich juice, bicarbonate that neutralizes the acid coming out of the stomach, and that's the secretin. And fat, okay, when we're talking about fat and absorption, CCK is the one, cholecystokinin. Ah, okay, we'll mostly talk about this in the next chapter. So these are either mono or disaccharides and the carbohydrate family. So there happens to be more than a few names for glucose, but it's the blood sugar. The ultimate breakdown of carbohydrates, glucose. That should be in which of the following tissues is glycogen? Okay, this is not really in these chapters. It's in the next chapter, so this won't appear on the test yet. Glycogen is a way we store glucose in the muscle and liver. Degradation of again, this is more like chapter 4, so I wouldn't worry about this too much. Soluble fibers in the large intestine is bacterial, and blood glucose falls when pancreatic enzyme is secreted to stimulate. So we said that already, glucagon. Which form are most dietary lipids found? Okay, that's a good question. They're triglycerides. Okay. Sometimes you hear or there's concern of having too high triglycerides in the bloodstream, and what causes that? Is it intake of too much fat? Is it enhanced by levels of cholesterol? Is it some other thing? Is it genetic? Lots of questions around but in general, having too high a level of triglycerides and cholesterol in the bloodstream, there's a better chance of formation of plaques in blood vessels, leading to blockages or high blood pressure. And we'll end with this, my plate, nice colorful estimation of how we should be getting certain components in a healthy eating pattern. And we'll conclude right here. I hope this is This has been helpful to us, and we have an exam coming up. I hope everybody's be ready for that. Send me an email if you have any questions, comments that you'd want to discuss or ask about. Okay, so long for now.